Welcome, folks, to the 119th episode of the Lessons from the Cockpit show. I'm your host, Mark Hasara, and for over 60 years, my passion has been everything aviation. I love airplanes. On the Lessons from the Cockpit show, we interview some of the most fascinating and intriguing pilots, aircrew members, maintainers, and aviation nuts from all over the world. We want to hear their stories, but more importantly, what did they learn from being in these extreme and extraordinary military, commercial, and even general aviation environments? The purpose of our show is to illustrate how does the aviation world work, but more importantly, improve critical thinking skills both in the air and on the ground. This episode of the Lessons from the Cockpit show is brought to you by Wall Pilot. Custom aviation art for the walls of your home, office, or hangar. These are incredibly detailed wall prints that you peel off and stick to your walls, and they come in 4, 6, and 8 foot lengths. I've got a 4 footer right here behind me of my airplane at Kadena 8874. We also do custom work. Go to wallpilot.com and fill out the sheet that we have there, and we can make a print of your favorite airplane with your tail number, unit number, and if it's a modern jet, even your weapons load. Folks, today we're going to talk about what's going on in Iran. A lot of you have been emailing me, texting me, calling me, Mark, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? And particularly now that there has been an accident involving tankers. So grab an adult beverage of your choice, sit down, strap in, and let's begin the Lessons from the Cockpit show with me talking about what is going on in the Middle East. I've wanted to do this for a long time, but there's so much going on, not only in the Middle East, but even down in Central South America. We're doing stuff down there too. So I'm going to start where everybody wants me to start, obviously. What happened in the KC-135 incident? So, quick recap. Two KC-135s, one taking off before the other, leaving Ben Gurion International Airport at Tel Aviv. One is a Beale Air Force Base tail, a reserve unit. The second one to take off about half hour, 45 minutes later was an Andrews tail. So the Beale tail is 638017. The Andrews tail is 623556. Now, understand that that does not mean a Beale crew or an Andrews crew was on the aircraft. And as a matter of fact, we found out today that 3 of the crew members on 3556, the one that crashed, were a Rickenbacker crew from Ohio. And there's a tremendous tribute to Tyler, the boom operator, that has just shown up. Young kid, terrific athlete, quarterback of his academy school that he went to. I mean, folks, you got to understand, these are the cream of the crop kind of people. And he's just a 19, 20-year-old boom operator who unfortunately has lost his life in this particular accident. Now, the 2 aircraft were on a night refueling mission in Western Iraq, not Eastern Iraq, where it's very mountainous terrain. The same mountain range that Mount Ararat is in that goes from Eastern Iraq up through Eastern Turkey. They were out over Western Iraq, the Anbar province, and supposedly near a town called Arutba. And folks, it is flat desert terrain. It's the An Nafud Desert. So They're at night, no clouds, VFR. You can see for a long ways. Very dear friend of mine's son was flying in a Weasel Viper, and he said, you could see 80 miles. So weather is not a factor. Terrain, not a factor. Both airplanes were involved in air refueling, although they were not air refueling at the time, according to reports. And I want to read you something before I go on here. Why I've waited a day or two to do this. It's from the great Prussian general Karl von Clausewitz. And I want to read to you what he said. Many intelligence reports in war are contradictory, comma, even more are false, comma, and most are uncertain, period. This is why I've been telling everyone, let's wait 48 to 72 hours and see what happens, see what comes out. And I'm glad I've done that. And today, believe it or not, I've had a slew of interviews from TV channels, not only here in Utah, but across the U.S. because more and more is coming out, like the crew that was involved. And I believe over the next 48 to 72 hours, there will be more that'll come out. And maybe in 15 to 30 days, a preliminary report about why did two tankers collide? And there's a very sobering picture of the Beale airplane, tail number 8017, with half its tail gone. And there's now posted on X a group calling themselves the Islamic Resistance of Iraq that said they shot down the Andrews airplane, tail number 623556, even though CENTCOM has said no enemy action was involved in this. So you can see where Karl von Clausewitz calls it the fog of war. And when you have an incident like this, the fog early on tends to be pretty thick. And we'll see what happens over the next couple of days. Anyway, they collided somehow. Don't know if they were maneuvering. Don't know if they had the terminal collision avoidance system on that tells you in the cockpit via voice warnings that somebody's getting close to you. It calls out traffic, traffic if it looks like there's a trend of an airplane coming towards you. And then it'll tell you climb now, descend now, if there's an imminent collision. So the airplanes hit each other. One goes down. One makes it back to Ben Gurion, about 400 miles away. So that's not very far. But according to Flight Radar 24, there's a notification function on there, and a lot of people following any aircraft that's squawking 7700, the emergency code. And of course, everybody went right to it. When I went to Flight Radar 24 to find it, there was 27,566 people following what that aircraft was doing because it was squawking 7700. It was out over the Mediterranean and was kind of doing laps. The airplane then comes in and lands. And of course, that crew is getting debriefed and talked to right now as part of the ongoing investigation. So I admonish all of you, wait till there is a preliminary report from Air Mobility Command or from CENTCOM about truly what happened here. Because as I read to you, intel reports in war are contradictory, comma, even more are false, comma, and most are uncertain. Everything people are talking about on the internet right now is speculation. There's one gentleman on X who has done a really great article that I will link to. His name is Campbell, and he's from the KC-135 community and KC-10 community. And he's got a really good article that he just put up today on what he thinks was going on. I want to give you kind of an overview of KC-135 air refueling planning, KC-10, excuse me, KC-46, KC-135, potentially KC-330s down there from different countries that are also part of this mix. So let's start with coalition airplanes first. One of the problems that we had during Operation Anaconda was we were told we had to use the Dutch KDC-10s. Problem was the Dutch KDC-10s didn't hold as much as our KC-10s, and they were boom only, not boom and drogue and air refuelable. I didn't want them. I don't need more boom airplanes. I had plenty of them. I needed airplanes that had drogues. And there was a kind of a sharp conversation between me and the Ninth Air, or not the Ninth Air Force, the CENTCOM engagements guy, Marine, who I have utmost respect for, going back and forth. You know, I can't use these. I can't use these are players, Sluggo. You got to have them. You got to take them. You got to take they're players. You know, and then I find out that the airplanes are going to swap out every Friday and Saturday, so they're gone for 48 hours back to the Netherlands. And I'm like, no, we ain't doing this. Ended up having to take them anyway. Well, the only airplanes that they could refuel were MC-130s, F-16s, F-15s, and the NATO AWACS, not the Air Force AWACS, the NATO AWACS. You see where this is going? And F-16s. Only those five. And I'm arguing with him. You're not doing me any good here. They're players, Logo. You got to take them. All right. We'll slip them in there somehow. So, fortunately, in the Middle East, several countries have the A330 tanker that is both boom and drogue and air refuelable, like the KC-10, like the KC-46. And believe me, that makes an air refueling planner's job so much more easier because if the airplane's running out of gas, I just go fill it up again. Or there's airplanes that are going home and have a lot of gas on them, like 30,000 pounds extra. And I say, go put it in the KC-10. At that time, it was a KC-10. But now it's like the A330s or the KC-46s. We call it consolidating. Yes, those crews hate that because it means they're going to be out longer, but it's just one of the prices of doing business. So take into account that our tankers are probably not the only tankers flying missions in the region. The Saudis have the A330, the the Qataris have A330, the UAE have A330s. So there's a fairly robust tanker mix in theater. Now, airspace. And this is a point that I want all of you to remember because it's so critical. There are a lot of airplanes flying in the sky over there. The KC-135 has nothing other than TCAS to give the crew situation awareness on what's around it, other than talking to the AWACS or a ground control intercept station that's controlling the air refueling. So that's going on. There's no defensive systems on the KC-135. There is the LRCM laser countermeasure system on the KC-46s and the A330s. So the KC-135s do not have that system. And it's made mostly for man-portable air defense systems in the takeoff and landing regimes of air refueling operations. So the airspace is packed with F-15s, F-16s, A-10s, F-35s, F-22s. Let's see what else. Oh, the ISR deck is uh, RC-135s, rivet joint and Cobra ball because they're shooting ballistic missiles. That's what the Cobra ball does. Um, what else would be in the ISR deck? Those are the predominant ones, though. And then you've got the bombers coming from now RAF Fairford and some still coming from the States. All of them are trying to pack into Iraq, the Persian Gulf, Iran, and there's just not a lot of space, folks. When I was the chief of the air fueling control team, my airspace guy, um, Odie, we were making them 35 miles wide by 75 miles long, rectangles, and about 4,000 feet thick. You had to make them 35 miles long because of the bone. The B1, as it gets heavier, has to go into higher power settings to include min afterburner to stay on the tanker. But the big thing is you're going faster at 320 miles an hour and you can only use 15 degrees of bank, making the turning circle larger. And so I went into the, believe it or not, the our instrument manual, how you fly on instruments, because in the back of it, there's a turn radius uh, calculator, okay? And it's just a flat sheet of paper and it says, okay, if you're going 15 degrees of bank at this um, airspeed, your turning circle is going to be this big. And 35 wide gave us, I think, 2 miles on each side with a bone at 320 knots at 15 degrees of bank. That's the level of detail you have to go into when you're doing this kind of planning. All of the receivers. Now let's talk about the A-10s. The A-10s have the same engines that the old S-3 Vikings have on them, the Hoovers. Okay, sound exactly the same. And you have 10 hard points on the A-10 and those engines. Not real powerful. We typically had to do them between 9 and 12,000 feet. We could do them higher, but the hogs didn't want to do that because they're literally like standing, have one foot on the throttles in order to keep up. And we had to do a descent, what we call a toboggan, at 300 feet per minute, 300 feet down per minute in order for them to stay on, particularly when they're very heavy. When they first showed up, they're getting like their pre-strike refueling prior to going into their volt time. The AC-130s and the MC-130s, we do down around 3,000 feet. Particularly a heavy loaded AC-130 just cannot get up any higher because it's carrying that much ammunition in the back of the jet. The MC-130s are carrying all kinds of things. It may be Special Forces troops. It may be Special Forces troops with their vehicles. It may be what they call container delivery system, CDS bundles that have beans, butter, bullet, food, MREs, all those kinds of things that they just throw out the back to resupply a group. You never know what's in the back of the MC-130, but we always did it down low at about 3,000 feet. Obviously, we tried to do this in sanitized spaces, but there were many, many times we did the MC AC-130s in bad guy territory. Story from Afghanistan. The MC AC-130s were refueling in an area in the Pakistan tribal areas between 6 and 9,000 feet. And so when we brought A-10s down there, I trying to find a low place. And finally, the special ops refueling planner said, "Hey, I got this place over the tribal areas. Here's the altitude of it. It's in this valley, but it's got plenty of room. I know your A-10s are coming down. You can do them there." And that's in fact where we began doing them. I didn't know Bigfoot existed for 48 hours. So the first hogs that came down there were fueling, at 19,000 feet, and we're just hanging on, you know, trying to stay on the boom. The KC-135 is going about 220 knots. It may have its flaps down uh, because I think the restriction was if our gross weight was 225,000 pounds, we had to have the flaps at 20. And we couldn't go lower than 210 air refueling speed because at 190, there's not enough airflow over the rudder vaders of the boom and to control it. And what I'm trying to tell you here with all of these numbers and all these examples is air refueling planning is complex. In a big operation like this, very complex. And it changes constantly. There's highways in the sky. There's areas you get off those highways, go into these 35-mile by 75-mile long rectangles as sanitized refueling airspace to refuel all the different airplanes. That does not take into account things that may shoot at you from the ground. But we look at all of that. Matter of fact, we would go to the Missile and Space Intelligence um, Agency, I think it's at Fort Hood, and tell them, hey, we're going to build a air refueling area right here. Can you give us your assessment threat-wise? What do we got here? And there were many times when the entire air refueling area came back yellow, meaning caution. I was not able, anything that had red in it, we moved. We were not going to put any crews in danger. Uh, I want you to understand that there is a lot of gas moving. In an air campaign like this, just in theater airplanes, they're probably doing about 10 million to 15 million pounds a day offloaded. That does not take into account the B1s, B-52s, B2s coming from the States and from England. That does not account for the cargo airplanes that are bringing bombs, Patriot missiles, and everything in theater. We counted those totally separately. But that's also in the millions of pounds a day. B2 planning rule of thumb, as we call it, the B2 would get 80,000 pounds every 5 hours, and they're flying 36 to 38-hour missions. The two B2s that went to Libya at the very end of the Obama second administration took on 955,000 pounds of gas just in two airplanes to drop 85 baby JDAMs, 500-pound joint direct attack munitions on two separate training camps. Clip 1-1 and Clip 1-2 were their call signs. So when I say 10 to 15 million pounds of gas, it doesn't include those airplanes that are coming from outside the CENTCOM AOR. In the 26 days of the Shakanak campaign, 417,133,000 pounds of jet fuel was passed to other receivers. Would allow a Ford F-150 truck to make 2,685 round trips to the moon, 7 round trips to the sun, or keep a 737 airborne for 11 years and 9 months. When we say nobody kicks ass without tanker gas, we mean it. None of this, absolutely none of this in the Middle East would be going on if it weren't for tankers. and we've got the most of them. I think we're down about 325 tails now, with one missing as of yesterday. So you've got this very intense war going on, a lot of airplanes packed into one very small location that requires a lot of gas to feed the beast, meaning you've got a lot of tankers flying 24/7. So the potential is extremely high for what we call near midair collisions. And in the States, when you have something like that, you actually fill out a report. And we have a report that we fill out in the Air Force too, if we have a near miss. And you have to say, okay, how fast were you going? What altitude were you going? Uh, what position was the other airplane? Um, TCAS gives you, you know, was it 1,000 feet below you, 300 feet below you? I had a F-15E two ship Strike Eagles during a mission that I flew on during the second Gulf War that went under our tanker with their lights off so we couldn't see them at night. And on the TCAS system for about 4 seconds, it said -3, 300 feet. So the potential for midair collisions is very high. And I would tell people we are the biggest threat. The air defenses of Iran are pretty much gone. If B-52s, B-1s, and maybe even B-2s are flying over Iran during the daytime, then they don't have anybody that can reach out and touch us. And I've seen a lot of videos. As a matter of fact, I saw one yesterday of an SA-5 Gammon missile in its underground hardened shelter, but had the door open. The SA-5 is a very, very big missile. I think it has like a 550-pound warhead and can shoot beyond 150 miles. It's radar guided, and it has to have that radar guidance the whole time of flight, which makes it a prime wild weasel target. But pretty much all the air defenses over Iran have been neutralized. And I think they've been neutralized for quite a while. And I think when we first started bombing Tehran and other places, whatever the Israelis hadn't cleaned up during the 12-day war last year, we were able to clean up in Operation Epic Fury. That brings me to another point concerning air refueling and why I brought this up. General Mike Mosley, one of the greatest commanders I've ever worked for, was the Combined Forces Air Component Commander during Operation Iraqi Freedom Shock and Awe campaign. He later became Chief of Staff of the Air Force and unfortunately uh, left that position. Broke a lot of our hearts because he was a fantastic commander, in my opinion. Anyway, met me at the top of the stairs when I was coming back. When I was coming in, I was noon to midnight. Jerry, my counterpart, was midnight to noon. And at the top of the stairs, he goes, "I got to talk to you, Sluggo." I said, "What's up, boss?" "The gas is in the wrong place. We have to move it into Iraq. It's day 4 of the war, and there's still a lot of surface fire events going on toward our aircraft." But he asked us to move it because he said something very interesting. He said one thing to me, one thing that I told my guys on my team. He said, "Sluggo, the gas is in the wrong place. We have to move into Iraq now because 19-year-old kids are getting shot at An Najaf, and the tankers have to assume some of the risk too. Figure out ways to mitigate the threat, but tomorrow night I want tankers in Iraqi airspace." And I saluted and said, okay, boss. There was obviously some anxiety about doing this, but I had a fantastic team working for me. We made two, again, 35 by 75, 4,000 foot thick. I think we're 21 to 24. Okay. And then there was one below that, and it was uh, 18 to 20. And the almost directly south of Baghdad, just on the other side of the border, there used to be a disputed area, a diamond area in the Saudi-Iraqi southern border. We called it the Klingon neutral zone, and we put them just above that. The first one we opened was called Shania. The second one we opened was named Reba. We named them all after female country western singers. There were several more that opened up. Um, Faith was about 50 miles southwest of Baghdad. We called it Faith because he had faith in the fighter guys to blow away anybody that was going to threaten us. Leanne was out in the Anbar province where the guys and gals were hunting for scuds. Um, Martina was up near Al Qaim on the Syrian Iraqi border. When we found Jessica Lynch and we're going to go in and save Jessica Lynch in that hospital, we opened one near An Najaf and we called it Patsy. Can't have country western singers without Patsy. But we had them in Iraqi airspace. And I would assume at some point in time, just like we did Afghanistan and Iraq, tankers will be flying over Iranian airspace at some point in time. I would imagine they're all in the Persian Gulf right now or over Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, UAE, um, and Eastern Iraq. Now, some of you may be asking, Sluggo, how did you defend the tankers? And at first, we didn't know what we were going to do. And one night, we had 7 tankers that were engaged by what we thought was enemy action. Okay. But again, Clausewitz, contradictory, false, and uncertain. Took the reports over to a gal that was analyzing all the what we call Sapphire events. Jennifer was her name. She called me 45 minutes later and said 3 were Saddam, 4 was somebody else. Go down and talk to the Army. I didn't think to deconflict the tanker tracks with the Army. And in fact, they were firing their multiple launch rocket systems and ATACMs directly under the area where I had built the tanker tracks. That was on me. That was my fault as the leader of this team. I should have thought, well, Army artillery includes rockets and missiles. And when I asked one of the artillery guys, okay, how high does this round go? How high does uh, MLRS go? How high does ATACM go? I had to go talk to the U-2 planner and tell him the Army is shooting over U-2, no pun intended. He goes, we're at 70,000 feet. I said, yeah, I know. The ATACMs go higher than you are. And his eyes just went, what? Yeah, Randy. So back to our original question. What happened to these two tankers? How'd they collide? How did one break apart in midair? Because that's probably what happened. And how did one have half its tail sheared off and make it home? If they were flying in an air refueling area together, then some kind of maneuvering was going on and they hit each other. what we call mid-mission join-ups is something we've been doing for a long time where one tanker will take off and then another tanker will take off 35 minutes later and they'll join up. We do it all the time, night and day. Anything I would tell you is speculation. If if any kind of ground fire was involved, then they were reacting to it and getting out of the way, getting out of the field of fire, lost situational awareness, and hit each other. Again, CENTCOM has said there was no enemy action involved. Even though there is a group claiming that they've been tracking them and trying to shoot them down. If they were just maneuvering to get a better setup, then they lost situational awareness and hit each other. There's one story on the internet that one of the airplanes was what we call a Christine, an air refuelable KC-135. There's only 8 of them in the inventory of what we're at 325 tankers now. It used to be 732 in the old Strategic Air Command days, the 80s. And if they were trying to rejoin for an offload, then something went wrong during that evolution, or something happened when they were refueling. I think that theory is doubtful because, again, there's only 8 of those airplanes in existence. And when I was in the 135 community, those 8 Christines were in one squadron at McConnell. And they had very specific missions for that airplane that they needed to be able to air refuel. And I'm not going to go into that here. I want you to think about this. The crew that survived. They know that something's happened to their airplane. They cannot see the tail from anywhere inside the airplane. There's no way for them to know that half of their tail is missing other than the airplane ain't flying like it was a few minutes ago. They may have had another airplane come up and give them a battle damage check and call them on the radio and say, yo, dudes, half your tail's gone. And it's gone at the Beale Air Force Base stripe at mid tail, which would tell me as an aircraft commander, all right, we got our work cut out for us. We got to go find a place where we can let's do a controllability check and find out what configuration the airplane has got to be in. Obviously, gear is going to be down, but what flap setting are we going to use? How fast do we fly the jet so that it maintains some type of rudder capability? And I think that's why they were out over the ocean doing laps. If I was flying the airplane, that's what I would have done. Out over the ocean, I would have come down at altitude, probably about 12 to 9,000 feet, and let's see how the airplane handles with the gear down. Okay, what airspeed do we have to have? And you feel the airplane get mushy. All right, we're going to stay 10 to 15 knots above that. All right, let's put the flaps down to 20. Flap speed at 20 was 220 knots. Again, what does the airplane feel like? Can I control it? Particularly control it on approach to a landing where I'm going to have power changes with the thrust going up as the gear come down and the flaps go down because now I've got more drag on the airplane. And how's it going to handle when I flare to land? And I think I hope that's what this crew was doing when they're out over the ocean. They're trying to figure out how to get the jet on the ground. But during this whole time, they have their NDR checklist, descent checklist, approach checklist, landing checklists. Now they're doing a controllability check with the knowledge that one of their airplanes is down, and that crew knows the names of every one of those people that are no longer with us. That crew that landed knew who was on the other jet and knew that it had crashed. I realized it was in friendly territory. Everybody has said that, but usually there is some type of rescue combat air patrol that goes in there, and there's all of that discussion and conversation going on over the radio, setting that all up. Hopefully, this crew just focused on let's get the airplane on the ground. But there's a mental and emotional thing going on too, because they have a pretty good idea of who's not coming back. We already know it's three Ohio reservists. Their names have been released. There's three more. Um, those six Ohio reservists and the reservists that were on the Beale tanker, they knew their names. And you have to understand that's a tough position to be in, knowing that somebody you may have worked out with, played basketball with, ate with, isn't coming home. And there's a lot of emotions that go with that. Last night, I made a very quick post for my YouTube channel on this event. I had the Flight Radar 24 snapshot of 8017, doing orbits out over the ocean, had a picture of the jet, and then had a picture of the Andrews jet 3556. And I got to be honest with you, before I could do that post and build it, I went down, hugged my wife, put my face in her shoulder, and just let it out. I haven't been around tankers for 20 years, but it's a very tight community. And when you have an airplane accident like this in a community that has very few accidents or mishaps like this, it hurts. I've talked to my squadron commander from Okinawa. We shared a few words and a few emotions, and obviously a lot of others. More will come out about this. I'm sure there was fighter aircraft that were in the vicinity and probably saw what happened, and we'll go from there. As we get more information, I'll do one of these Nation's Dime type of podcast episodes. But right now, a lot of speculation until the investigation board comes out with their preliminary report and then their final report after reviewing the two airplanes, after talking to the crew that survived, and it may be pretty sobering because now you have to put recommendations down too. That's the one thing about crash investigations. There's a colonel who is the board chairman. You have a number of people that are flyers, maintainers, all those things that are looking over pieces of the airplane, and they're just trying to figure out, okay, what recommendations do we need to make in tactics, techniques, and procedures? What recommendations do we need to make for things we need to put on the airplane to give us more situational awareness? Is there something in the training of our air crews that could have been a factor in this collision? All of those things are going to be looked at. All those things will be included in this report. I think that's it on the 135, folks. I want you to remember my opinion only. These are my words, not any official words from the Department of War or the United States Air Force. And Karl von Clausewitz has said, many intel reports in war are contradictory, even more are false, and most are uncertain. Well, look at the example of the three F-15s, the three F-15E Strike Eagles. Initially, they said it was a Patriot system. Was it an American Patriot system? Was it a Kuwaiti Patriot system? No idea. But folks, as soon as I saw that video of the one spiraling down, the crew had gotten out and the airplane's just spiraling down, I knew it wasn't Patriot. I knew it wasn't Patriot because during the second Gulf War, shock and awe, a Patriot battalion had engaged an RAF GR4 Tornado that was RTBing back to its base. And it was coming into the what we call the delouse point, where you enter into the return to forces procedures and ground track. And Patriot's looking at everything outside that. And that airplane, according to what the Patriot saw, was some type of missile coming down toward Kuwait and engaged it successfully and blew it to smithereens with the two crewmen dying. And we knew why. And we sent word out, don't do this. Do not do these things and functions in the Patriot system. And sure enough, a week later, we shot down an F-18 Hornet that was on its way back to the USS Constellation. Killed that pilot too. And that airplane was also blown into little itty bitty pieces. So when I saw the F-15 airframe going like this, doing the falling leaf of death, I knew it wasn't Patriot, because when Patriot hits another airplane, it blows it into little pieces. When I heard it was a Kuwaiti F-18 that shot all three of them down, I went, wait a minute. What was the Kuwaiti pilot thinking? What were the F-15E Strike Eagle crews thinking when their radar homing and warning gear lit up and is squealing and screaming at them that they've been locked up? Say, there's still a lot of questions about that too. All right, let's leave this. On to the actual air campaign and my thoughts. A lot of people have asked me, what do you think? I think that the intelligence for this campaign has actually been superb in most instances. I think the intelligence system that we have is operating at a very peak performance. To be able to go and find The Ayatollah and his inner circle of people at a meeting at 8:15 in the morning in a building, in a bunker under that building, is just an incredible piece of intelligence work. And what we're finding out now is Mossad had a lot of people spread out through the regime. And there's even, this is how good it is, if it's really true. They had a listening device and a tracking device in the uh, wedding ring finger. He has a stone that's pretty good size in the ring that he had on his wedding finger, on his left hand. There was other things about, and again, remember, contradictory, false, and uncertain, but there was other stories that said the dentists put fillings that had tracking devices. There was something about colonoscopies. But folks, they knew that this meeting was going to happen. They understood that at this meeting, there was going to be decisions made of do we strike first or do we wait? And one of the IRGC commanders that had been there for a long time was a Mossad agent and had been telling them everything the inner circle had been doing, when they were meeting, what they were meeting for. And the air campaign got moved up to accommodate this event. The report says that the Israeli Air Force dropped 30, 31 GBU 31 2,000-pound bunker busters on the building. That's a lot of bombs. That's a lot. But they did it pretty much with impunity. You can still hear guns going off, anti-aircraft artillery, excuse me, going off. But I think our role in this wasn't leadership. We don't have a really good track record with regime change and leadership targets. And again, that's my own opinion. But we've been concentrating on what props up the regime, the infrastructure, the military that props up the regime, particularly anything that can threaten our Gulf Coast and Middle East partners. And we've gone after the ballistic missile stuff pretty hard. There's thousands of them, though, and they're still going after them. They're saying that launches have decreased significantly of both ballistic missiles and drones. And I don't know if you saw the story. We actually captured some of the Shahed drones that were sold to the Russians that they were using in Ukraine. And a company here in the United States did some reverse engineering on them, made them more lethal, harder to find, and more accurate. And so we've been using their own Shahed drones against them. I want to talk real quick about the ballistic missile strategy because I've been involved now in both of the Gulf Wars, and now I'm watching this. And also having gone through the weapons school where we had one of our scenarios was based on a historical campaign in World War II called Operation Crossbow, going after the doodlebugs. The first Gulf War, we did the Great Scud Hunt, and it soaked up a lot of resources. Even General Horner said, "Why are we doing this?" Well, we didn't want to fracture the coalition because a lot of those missiles were headed toward Israel. After that war, we learned from it, we got to figure out how to deal with these ballistic missiles. And they used some of Ronald Reagan's um, Star Wars stuff to kind of start that ball rolling. In the second Gulf War, there was a number of ballistic missiles on like the first day toward Kuwait, and we intercepted them. The Patriot system, the Aegis cruiser destroyer system, the satellite system, the intelligence system that includes both ground, air breathing, and space-based assets is pretty tight. And for what I'm hearing is that within a matter of minutes, and I don't know if that's 3 to 5, 5 to 8, 8 to 12, but within a matter of minutes, we've got strike assets on those launch locations, many of them underground, which we use the penetrating bombs on, some of them above ground, which the Reaper and Hellfire are taken out, but the F-15Es are also working with the F-35s that have their aperture camera system on board that can also detect launches, and they're running around together striking targets too. The Shahed drone is the one that gives me the most anxiety, though, because it is mobile. They have trucks that carry like 8 to 10 of them, and they can just put all the information, navigation information. I want you to go to this desired mean point of impact, and off it goes. Drone swarm is a very, very tough target set. But again, the United States comes up with some pretty interesting ways of dealing with it too. So objective number one is neutralize regime. Objective two is get rid of their nuclear capability. Objective three is their ballistic missile capability. And I think objective four is the IRGC. That's a lot of target sets. Oh, and the economic viability of all of the Gulf Coast countries, keeping the Strait of Hormuz open. I got a lot of comments on a post that I made. Yeah, great Sluggo. We're firing a 500,000 to a $1.2 million missile at a $50,000 drone. Valid point. War of attrition. Bleed to bankruptcy. A Vietnam era rocket has come to save the day. It's called the Advanced Precision K weapon system. You know what the K stands for? Falco rocket. It's a laser guided 2.75 rocket. They have operationally tested this, ops check good, and wrote the tactics for it and everything. And it's now being employed in theater. These 2.75 rockets come in launchers, tubes that hold 7 of them. You can put 6 of those rocket pods on a Strike Eagle. He or she is carrying 42 precision guided, laser guided 2.75 rockets, which are more than accurate enough to hit some of these drones. And I think if I looked it up right, if I remember right, Wikipedia said the rocket costs about $15,000 to $17,000, which is pretty good. And they're very accurate. I know of a person in a squadron over there. They have one gentleman who's a double ace if we're counting drones and cruise missiles for acedom. He's got 11. And we'll probably go higher now. So once again, we've taken our American ingenuity and said, how can we do this more effective and more efficiently. I know in one case, there's one F-16 squadron over there where the squadron commander said, we've got all these older AIM-9 mics in our missile locker that's not as expensive as the new AIM-9X. Let's start using these, and has done a very good job with them. I'll put down in the show notes the story of him being involved in a SAM bush in Yemen, and I think he and his wingman got silver stars for dealing with this. Do you see the caliber of people that we've got over here? There's a F-15E crew that was involved in the April 13th, 14th, 2024 mass ballistic missile, cruise missile, drone raid of Iran against Israel. And they just put up a wall of Strike Eagles and dealt with them. They shot down 70, 80 missiles, cruise missiles that night. Two destroyers off the coast of Israel dealt with the ballistic missiles. The Strike Eagles were dealing with the cruise missiles and the drones. And there's a crew from Lakenheath and the Panthers that got silver stars uh, for their efforts that night. And it's an amazing story. The major in the front seat was a weapons school grad. The gal captain in the back seat, just directing traffic. And then they had to land, refuel, rearm, and go back up. And there was people on the ground with Patriot missiles going off, busting ballistic missiles and shooting at drones and everything, rearming, refueling, and giving intelligence updates to the crews before they went out. It's an amazing story. Uh, Squadron from Lakenheath, and then the 335th Chiefs from Seymour Johnson were involved in that 13-14 April um, event. So we've come a long way on how we deal with these drones. But again, there's so many of them that it's a problem. Nikita Khrushchev said, I'll bury the West. Quantity has a quality all its own, and that's a very true statement. But good old Yankee ingenuity has come up with ways to deal with it. Less expensive, more efficient, more cost effective. We've got the CRAM over there, the 20 millimeter Gatling cannon, the CWIS system on the ships. They're doing a great job. The pilots are hunting these things down and killing them air to air, knocking them down air to air. So there's good stuff going on. And it all requires gas. A very good friend of mine has a son who's over there, and he's been able to talk to his dad one or two times. They'll have long days. It was said that the Israeli pilots are flying 2 to 3 missions a day from Israel to Iran, Tehran, and back. That's a long flight. Some of these fighter guys are staying up for 8 hours or more with a lot of different weapons on the aircraft. And I remember from Desert Storm how tired I was. And finally, the flight surgeon says, you got to put this crew in crew rest for a while. They've been flying nonstop. We were one of the more experienced crews. And so we'd been flying pretty hard twice a day sometimes. Um, my opinion of why we're doing this. The Iranian regime, Ayatollahs, came about in 1979, 80 timeframe. And it's just been a mess over there since. It was always death to America, death to Israel. And when you hear that often enough, loud enough, long enough, then people start believing it. Do I think the Iranian population are enemies? No. Do I think the regime is our enemies? Yes. And the first term of our current president, we were able to do a drone strike on a particular gentleman, like we used to say, the KOC, just needs killing. He was responsible for the deaths of, I think, 680 American servicemen involved in the Beirut bombing of the Marine barracks. All, excuse me, all kinds of things. A lot of people were saying, they're going to have a nuclear weapon. Yeah, we've heard that before, haven't we? Weapons of mass destruction. How'd that work out for us? But I feel that the Mossad intelligence community had a pretty good handle on where that nuclear capability actually sat. They've been responsible for terror throughout the region, terror throughout other regions. And I read something today, again, what did I say? Contradictory, false, and uncertain. But there was attack on a oil location, petroleum location down in Texas, and they're saying it may have been IRGC folks that had come up through Mexico. So my thoughts are, and again, these are my thoughts and my thoughts only, and I stand by them, having spent a lot of time over there. This regime has been at war with the United States for a very long time. This regime is responsible for the deaths of many of our service members, contractors, and maybe even some of our citizens, not just in that region, but other regions like Africa. That regime has been responsible for trying to create a nuclear capability with the help of its allies, North Korea particularly. It's a funny thing. When you go look at the launch complex for the North Korean missiles and the one that Iran uses for its long range missiles, they're amazingly similar. Imagine that. We already know that the North Koreans were involved in helping the Syrians build a nuclear reactor along the Euphrates River, which the Israeli Air Force took out in September of '06 or '07. You have Hezbollah, Hamas, Hezbollah particularly, who is been prosecuting a proxy war against the Americans and some of our Middle Eastern partners. A number of my friends have said to me, we have not been at war with Iran. Why are we going in here? And I tell them, uh, we've been at war with Iran for a lot longer than you think. We've been at war with the Iranians in the Middle East for a lot longer than you think. The other comment I get all the time, it's all about oil. I say to that, it's all about economic viability and the commerce that goes in and out of one of the most important sea lines of communications in the world, the Strait of Hormuz, and Iran's ability to target and close anything moving through the Strait of Hormuz and anything across the Strait of Hormuz from Bandar Abbas and that narrow portion of the Strait of Hormuz, like what, 30 miles, 31 miles. And there's been a lot of talk about that being closed. Well, their Navy and their submarines sure aren't doing it. I'll tell you something, folks. And General Kane talked about this today. And I was amazed and a little confused at first when he said this. He gave a shout out to the Army artillery folks. And one of the things he said in there was the Army Advanced Tactical Missiles, ATACMs, sunk a submarine because they targeted it with an ATACM missile. When I was working in the Master Air Attack Plan Cell in 2003 for Iraq, we had this funny thing we'd say when we take like a fighter strike asset off of a particular target and then put a TLAM on it because either the threat was high, we didn't have enough fighters, whatever. And it was, dude, you're getting a TLAM with a lot of smiles and laughing. And I can only imagine in the Master Air Attack Plan Cell meeting, they're saying we got to get rid of all these naval forces that the Iranians have. And some army guy raised his hand and says, we'll take the subs. Can you imagine that conversation? And the chief of the Master Air Attack Plan Cell, the MAP cell, looking at him going like, what? Says, yeah, we'll take that. We got that. And it was the first time it's ever been done. Army artillery, ATACMS missiles used against a Navy force. Do you see, folks, the ingenuity and innovation our airmen, soldiers, sailors, Marines, and Coast Guard have? It's not, dude, you're getting a TLAM. Dude, you're getting an ATACM. And I kind of laughed. And it was a laugh of, wow, I would have never thought of that. I would have never thought of that. And I'm sure there's going to be so many more stories that are going to come out of conventional targets being quote unquote serviced, as we used to say, by unconventional means. This prism missile, which I know nothing about, that I've got to learn what it is and how far it can go, all those kinds of things, being used against some of these ballistic missile sites. Do all of you agree with me that the A-10 should never go away? The A-10 is still over there doing A-10 things. There was a video taken from the ground by who knows who of an A-10 at night and the GAU-8 Avenger cannon and the brrr. I don't know how we'll replace that airplane. I don't know if there's anything to replace that airplane, but I sure see the hogs being around for a while longer. There's so many things it can do. We found out that it could do maritime close air support in an exercise. One of the best ways to take on these boat swarms coming at the Navy ships was hogs. And guess what weapon they used on the hogs to prosecute these suicide boats that are coming at, ridiculous speeds towards ships. The gun. And of course, it has Maverick missiles, has the rocket pods that they've been using forever. Some really interesting target and servicing of target innovations that are coming out of this, which I think is pretty cool. All right, I'm looking through my notes here one more time, see if there's anything else. All right. I want you to know that I'm spending a lot of time on X and Twitter, particularly CENTCOM, Central Command's page on X has got a lot of information on it and a lot of videos are being put up there. There's a lot of comments, good and bad, like there's always going to be. But I'm finding a lot of the information I'm finding on X has been actually pretty good. And like I said, there's a guy that wrote a great article on his thoughts about the tanker colliding that I read through. That's really good. He just goes by Campbell. And I'll have that link down there. As we go on with this campaign, I will make more of these. Please, in the comments, if there's particular questions you want me to answer or something to, you want me to find out, leave a comment and let me research it. We're in a very fluid situation right now with Hezbollah targets in Lebanon getting struck, still a lot of targets in Iran that we're going after. And I didn't even talk about the Special Forces raid that happened in, I believe it was Honduras, where we went after another drug lord in the middle of the night with Honduran Special Forces, one of our good partners down there. And we're dealing with very dynamic battlefields, a lot of things changing. But we're dealing also with some pretty innovative ways of striking these targets. And you got to admit, in 2003, I'd never thought we'd have a coalition that would allow the Israelis to be part of it in the Middle East. And not only be a partner, but allow American aircraft to operate from Israeli air bases. Because that was a non-starter for so long. And now we're doing it. Last thing, prayers to the families of the 6 airmen who perished in this mid-air collision. It hurts. Even though I've been gone, even though I've been gone 20 years, almost 20 years, 2007. We're a close community. Rarely have we had something like this happen. And we're usually very safe and get home. More to follow on what happened. Again, folks, let me express my gratitude to you for coming by, listening to my podcast, looking at the short videos that I put up, and your comments, which about 98% of them are very kind words, very complimentary, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. I was very reluctant to start this. I didn't know how. I didn't know what equipment I had to have. And fortunately, my wife pointed me in the right direction, and one of my oldest son gave me the motivation to become a podcaster and YouTube pilot extraordinaire. But that didn't happen without all of you. I know that and I realize that. So thank you once again for listening to, as I always say, an old gray-haired knuckle dragon tanker pilot, and hope that you'll continue to come by and watch and listen. Hope and continue that you will have more of your friends join us, and hope that you'll become a Patreon member. I just had a one-on-one with one of my Patreon subscribers the other night. We spent an hour and a half just talking about what's going on over there and what's going on in our lives, everything. Thanks, Jason. It was a fun conversation. So, episode 119 on the nation's diplomatic, informational, military, and economic dime. I want all of you to remember Clausewitz's quote there. There's a lot of information coming out from a lot of different sources by people who have no reason to be opening their mouths. Okay. Sad that we lost a tanker. We have a very tight community, and I was part of it 20 years ago, and it even saddens me. I will do this again here in the next couple days as more comes out. You can expect me to start doing lives here pretty soon too. This episode is brought to you by Wall Pilot, custom aviation art for the walls of your home, office, or hangar. 4, 6, and 8 foot beautiful prints that you can peel off and stick on your wall like 8874 here behind me. We do custom work also. If you airplane you want your name on, tail number, unit, even a weapons load, we can do that. Go to wallpilot.com and send us a message. Join my Patreon club, All Ranks Club. The link is below. Also starting a Discord channel here real soon so that we have a community that's talking back and forth to each other. Again, folks, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate all of you coming by and taking a listen. We were over 311 million views in 2 years, and we're at 252,000 subscribers. So we're doing pretty good. We're doing pretty good. And that's all because of you. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate all of you coming by and listen to Grandpa. I keep being called that. None of my kids are married. I don't have grandkids yet, but I'm hoping. Sluggo signing out here.